Very clear that these two are at odds with each other. What's not so clear is what's the way forward. Let's bring in Edward Djerejian, the former U.S. ambassador to Israel and Syria, now director of the James Baker Institute at Rice University. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. I know that you are a diplomat, and yet I must ask this. Do you believe negotiating with Iran is the right move?
I do believe that. I think we have to give diplomacy a chance here. What President Obama and his administration have decided is to engage Iran strategically on this critical nuclear issue to determine whether an agreement can be reached, a real deal, not a false deal, that would cap Iran's nuclear capabilities, that would put into place a very intrusive inspections regime under the aegis of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Let's not forget, Chris, that Iran is a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And under that treaty, it has, according to the treaty, one of its articles, the right to have, develop, research a civilian, peaceful nuclear program. What's interesting in Netanyahu's presentation is that while he didn't use these words, he just said that this deal will give Iran multiple nuclear weapons. He is getting to the very heart of the administration's strategy, saying no nuclear enrichment, no 10-year timeline, you need a higher timeline, and that sanctions should not be linked to any deal, but to Iran's overall policies in the region, terrorism, relations with its neighbors, and relations with Israel.
Do you believe that the Prime Minister did offer a practical alternative, or is more sanctions and deny everything you've said for the last 20 years, is that a non-starter?
I think it's a non-starter. I mean, what the purpose of Bibi Netanyahu coming was to bring a considerable political pressure through the Congress on the administration to not do this deal. He made a very forceful, excellent presentation. He's a great orator. But fundamentally, he is saying this is not a deal that should be consummated by the administration. And he did not provide a viable alternative going forward. He did not say, here's a deal that Israel and the United States can work on. Here are the parameters of a deal that Israel thinks would be acceptable to it and perhaps the United States. I didn't hear that.
What is the outcome or the fallout of this dispute between these two men? Is it just two men differing? Is it two leaders of two countries differing? Is it two countries differing?
Chris, it's both. The United States is a global power. We have our national security interests. Israel is a very strong regional power. It has its interests. It looks upon Iran as an existential threat. The United States looks upon Iran as a real regional threat, but as a global power, the United States has its own interests, and it's pursuing its interests by engaging in this strategic negotiation with Iran. This is not the first time that the United States and Israel have seen the region in different terms. We can remember U.S. support and military equipment to Saudi Arabia, which the Israelis in the past opposed. So this is not the first time we're having a substantive dispute with Israel, a very close ally, one of our closest allies in the world. So that's not new, but it's based on a policy difference. The president feels very strongly that a strategic negotiation and agreement with Iran is better than the alternatives, which would be increased sanctions and the possibility of going to war. And Netanyahu doesn't see it that way.
Well, the concern is about an arms race, right? I mean, you know, one of the weaker arguments is, well, Israel has nukes. Why shouldn't Iran be able to have them? And the answer to that is because Israel hasn't made outward gestures that it wants to erase any memory of Iran from the face of the earth. But where do you draw the line in terms of who has these weapons and who doesn't? Because it seems to be a very sticky business and only getting worse.
Well, U.S. policy is to really stop any state getting nuclear weapons. We already have, you know, about 7 states that have declared states that have nuclear weapons. Israel has not declared that it has nuclear weapons, but everyone assumes that it is a nuclear weapon state. Under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, again, any country that signs up to it has the right to develop civilian peaceful nuclear energy. The trick there is to control that civilian program, no matter what country it is in order for it not to break out and become a nuclear weapon state. So there's always the danger that Iran could become, if there is an agreement, a threshold state. And what that means is, like, for example, Japan. In a short period of time, it could transform its civilian nuclear capabilities into a weapons program. That would have to be inspected, and if that happened, then the international community would have to take the necessary measures, which are always there.
Now, I guess the next issue that we'll have to follow will be whether or not Netanyahu, while not convincing the president, did functionally the same thing by getting into Congress's head about this, because now they may be what stops the president from moving forward. Ambassador, thank you very much for the perspective. Much needed and appreciated. Allison?
Thank you.